Welcome back to Front Row with Coronation. It's designed to give you, our clients, key insights to help you along your personal investment journey. Thank you for your amazing feedback and questions after our first episode, as we design the show around what's on your mind when it comes to investing. Stay tuned for the announcement of the winner of last episode's competition and to find out about how you could win 10,000 Rand in a unit trust this episode. In today's show, we're going to talk offshore investing and what is an ideal fund choice for those of you looking to invest in the best global opportunities out there. We'll also share our new TV advert with you, which communicates how good things come to those who don't wait to invest. But first up, we're going to meet Coronation's Chief Investment Officer, Carl Leinberger. As CIO, Carl is responsible for the team that manages your hard-earned money. He also co-manages our largest unit trust, the Coronation Balance Plus Fund. Welcome, Carl. It's really nice having you on Front Row today. So far this year, we've experienced high levels of volatility in global markets. And of course, geopolitical tensions are now top of mind for many investors. What's your take on how the year has started and on recent developments?
It's a dramatic and disconcerting start to the year, for sure. And I think it just shows, once again, that none of us really know what's coming, and none of us can see around the corner. Kind of felt like the COVID pandemic came too soon after the GFC, and now we're barely through the COVID pandemic and we've got sort of the threat of major war. And while I think that the impact on markets has been quite benign and not too material thus far, and therefore investors might not be feeling too emotive about things, I think the risk is that things escalate and that there are more serious markdowns. And why I say that's a risk is what always worries us is that what we see in times of crisis is that the end investor, for very good and understandable reasons, is very tempted to pull their money when there is bad news and when worrying things have happened and prices have fallen. But that is the wrong thing to do. The world was an unusually stable place for a long period of time. We are reverting to much more normal levels of volatility and uncertainty. We have to expect these. This is part of life. Therefore, this is part of markets. Pulling your money out when the news is bad and prices are falling is a bad idea. And as the end investor, what you want to get right is you want your money in markets for long periods of time with skilled managers that you believe in, because the returns and the experience decade after decade after decade have demonstrated that those that are prepared to do that achieve outsized returns, and those that react emotively and pull money in and out end up with very mediocre outcomes after long periods of time.
So as you mentioned, investors have a tendency to get swept up in the news flow and become really anxious about their investment portfolios. And at Coronation, we strongly emphasize focusing on the long term. Why is this such an important part of our investment philosophy?
In our opinion, the key thing to get right, investing is fundamentally a multi-decade endeavor. And if you're going to be managing your money with a time horizon that's shorter than that, there's going to be a disconnect between the horizon with which you're acting and the horizon, with which your goals are ultimately set. I think the great risk with people not taking, that long time horizon is inevitably they will be tempted to buy in when the news is good. Inevitably, when the news is good, prices are already high. They'll be tempted to sell out when the news is bad and prices have already fallen. And so they'll find themselves over and over again buying high and selling low, when the first thing you want to get right in investments is to buy low and sell high. The second key aspect to that question is that markets are pretty efficient at pricing in lots of short-term news flow and information. They're incredibly inefficient in pricing in the long-term value of assets. And so what you want with your money is you want your money invested with someone who can take advantage of that very significant discrepancy that exists between prices and the underlying long-term value of assets. And if you don't have a long time horizon in trying to avail yourself of that opportunity, you can never successfully exploit it. And so that's what we're all about at Coronation, is fishing where the fish are, looking where the market's getting things wrong. And we can only do that on your behalf if we do the right proprietary research, if we get our underlying views right, but then importantly, if you give us the money for the time that is required to unlock that opportunity.
A moment ago, you mentioned proprietary research, and as active managers, we do spend a lot of time on this. Could you tell us a little bit more about the team responsible for that very in-depth research that we do?
I think we're sometimes guilty of underplaying and under-communicating to the end investor how much deep research goes into every position in their portfolios, every consideration. For example, through the COVID pandemic, we had a molecular biologist who happens to be an analyst for Coro, and from January 2020, he ran with speaking to the world's leading epidemiologists on this, and he had more than 250 calls over 2 years. It's an extraordinary amount of research over and above what one might read in the general media. It gave us some fairly deep insights which actually resulted in very accretive and value-adding investment decisions made in client portfolios. If you look at the research effort going into the stocks that we own in your behalf and portfolios, it's a team of around about 40 people covering local and global stocks. And if we decide to own ShopRite in your portfolio, that won't be because we've met senior management and read a few broker research notes. We will have done very deep research, speaking to as many customers, competitors, suppliers, property experts as we can, lower levels of management, trying to understand the very deep fundamentals of that company and its long-term prospects. And that will apply to every single position across our portfolios.
As our Chief Investment Officer, you also co-manage our largest unit trust, which is the Coronation Balance Plus Fund. Tell us a little bit more about how the fund is positioned currently and, more importantly, what your return expectations are for the fund over the next 10 years.
Yeah, we've just come through a very good 3 years where returns have been very strong, notwithstanding the stresses of the COVID pandemic and now more recently with Russia's invasion. And our message to clients is, notwithstanding those 3 very good years, we're actually still optimistic about the next 5 years or so. We think there's lots of value. We're finding lots of value in the SA market. Again, notwithstanding a fairly negative view on the SA economy, we're finding lots of value in SA equities, lots of value in our bond market, and we're even finding value in our property market. Global equity indices are high, but there's been a hammering of emerging markets. There's been a hammering of long duration. And so we think there are very big stock picking opportunities in global markets. So the message for me to end investors in that fund is, notwithstanding a good few years, we are optimistic and we think good returns can be achieved, and we think the fund can do 10% a year. And we are not the kind of managers who are always optimistic. Those of you with good memories will remember me, and for at least 5 years between 2013 and 2018, being very negative on the return, the likelihood of good returns, and the valuations we were seeing out there.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for your valuable insights. We really appreciate it.
No problem, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It's clear from your feedback that offshore investing is something that many of you are wondering about. In fact, the winning question in last episode's competition is on this hot topic, and it's time to announce the winner. Congratulations to Nick from Cape Town. We'll be in touch with you about your 10,000 Rand prize in the Coronation Unit Trust of your choice. Nick asked us, at what point in your investment journey should you start considering foreign currency investments? He is 26 and has built up modest savings over the last 6 years, all denominated in South African rands. He asked what he should consider before moving into hard currency investment products. To answer this and more on offshore investing, here is Coronation Investment Specialist Insaf Kamish.
You should always have offshore exposure as part of your long-term investment portfolio. The level will depend on your personal circumstances and goals. Diversification is the number one rule of investments. So don't be too tempted to over-allocate to any one asset class or geographic region as the one outperforms the other. Getting the timing perfect is near impossible. So rather make sure that you have an appropriate mix of assets and geographic exposure to give you a better chance of achieving your investment goals over time. It's good to approach offshore investing in a structured, sensible way, making sure that you consider your personal circumstances, your investment objectives, how long you have to invest, and how much risk you're willing to take on. Studies show that a good starting point for an optimal portfolio is in the region of 30%. For instance, this is an appropriate level for conservative investors such as pensioners, who need to guard against having too much international exposure, as their assets need to meet their future liabilities here in South Africa. If you're younger, with still lots of time on your side, if you consider yourself to be a global citizen and have a high level of disposable income to invest, then you have a bit more latitude. You can have more in international assets then, depending on your objectives and risk tolerance. So there are different ways for you to gain international exposure with Coronation. You can invest in a local multi-asset fund, or balance fund as they're called, with some global exposure. Invest in a rand-denominated international fund, known as a feeder fund, or invest in a dollar-denominated international fund, which is foreign domiciled. So let's talk about the first route, which is investing in local multi-asset funds with some global exposure. If you are already saving for your retirement, for example, through your company pension fund, a retirement annuity fund, or an existing preservation fund, you may already have offshore exposure if you're invested in one of our multi-asset funds. Regulation caps the maximum that we are allowed to invest directly offshore at 45%. But we also have the ability to access global businesses that happen to be listed on the JSE. These businesses generate most of their revenue outside of the country, so local economic factors should not have a significant impact on their financial performance. What this means is that your multi-asset fund could have more than 50% effective offshore exposure, depending on your fund's risk profile. This is probably sufficient, but if you require additional offshore exposure, then you can consider the rand-denominated or the dollar-denominated funds. Here, it's best to consider where your money will be needed in the future. As with the feeder funds, your money will be paid back to you in rands, whereas with the dollar-denominated funds, it will be paid to you in a bank account held anywhere in the world. With the rand-denominated international fund, you can easily access worldwide opportunities. They are known as feeder funds as they invest directly into their respective dollar equivalents. With the feeder fund, you don't need to apply for tax clearance, and there's no need to convert your rands into foreign currency. Feeder funds provide full economic diversification by accessing investment opportunities outside of our borders. But they still operate under the laws of South Africa, and therefore you do not diversify jurisdictional risk. When you disinvest, it will be paid to you in rands into your local bank account here. You can invest in our feeder funds from as little as 500 Rand a month via debit order, or you can invest a lump sum of 5,000 Rand or more. Alternatively, you can invest in the dollar-denominated international funds, which is foreign domiciled. Note that first you will need to convert your rands into dollars. The government allows you to invest up to 1 million Rand a year in an international fund without any prior approvals. If your investment is more than 1 million Rand, you'll need to arrange for SARS tax clearance. You can invest a further 10 million Rand every year after you've received your tax clearance. So bear in mind also that the 1 million Rand annual allowance includes your international holiday spend for that year and whatever else you may have bought online internationally. So don't forget to include your Amazon purchase in the lump sum calculation. Our global funds are domiciled in Ireland. So by taking your money out of the country in this way, you eliminate the South African jurisdictional risk. The minimum investment into our dollar-denominated funds is $15,000. So it makes sense to first build up the required capital in a rand-denominated feeder fund until you have sufficient money to access the dollar-denominated funds. In summary, remember to consider your personal circumstances and goals when investing offshore. To decide between the rand-denominated or direct offshore routes, it may be best to understand where you will need your money in the future. So to answer Nick's question, a good long-term option for investors looking for global diversification is the Coronation Global Optimum Growth Fund. Let's find out more about that now.
If you want access to the best investment opportunities around the world, then the Coronation Global Optimum Growth Fund is an ideal choice. The fund is purpose-built to grow your money in US dollars over the long term. It leverages off of Coronation's team of investment professionals that spend their time doing research across all major regions, including developed, emerging, and frontier markets. They cover the full spectrum of listed asset classes such as equities, property, and fixed interest instruments. Since the fund was launched almost 23 years ago, it has proven its mettle, generating an after-inflation return of 7% in US dollars. That's the equivalent of multiplying your purchasing power in hard currency 4.5 times. You can access the Coronation Global Optimum Growth Fund through a feeder fund in rands or directly offshore in US dollars. For more information on the fund, please visit our website.
We love to inspire people to invest so that they can experience financial freedom and live their best lives. It's why we are delighted to share our new marketing campaign with you. We hope it will motivate South Africans to start investing now rather than waiting too long, because the sooner you invest, the sooner you can live the life you dream of.
Welcome to your best life. Gather the crew for a road trip on a Monday and feel that adrenaline rush all your blues away. Bask in blushing sunsets you won't believe and uncover hidden places where the dreams of fun worshippers live and breathe. Then frolic among the psychedelic corals down under with ocean puppies full of wonder. Drift gently into eastern forests where ancient wisdom mystifies, and finally witness the miracle of the northern skies. Then get down on the dance floor where the night never ever dies. Yes, this is the life. This is living to its core. Now tell me, what are you waiting for?
Thank you for joining us on Front Row with Coronation. We'd love to hear from you about how you found today's show, as well as what you'd like us to cover in future. If you suggest an idea or pose a question that we can include in our next episode, we'll top up your account with 10,000 Rand. So let us know your thoughts in the feedback section below, and we look forward to seeing you again in the front row.